The sky above Therian Prime was burning. Red flames covered the night as giant warships darkened the atmosphere. The enemy, called the Varnock, had come without warning, ripping apart cities with thunder and leaving ash where gardens once bloomed. Therian's people, once proud and peaceful, now hid underground like animals, whispering old prayers that no longer worked. They were not warriors. They had no fleets. Their homeworld had never prepared for war. Now their end was only days away. Chancellor Alira stood inside the ruined communications tower, staring at the shattered console in front of her. Her hands shook. She had never been trained for this. But behind her, hundreds of terrified refugees cried and screamed for hope. She knew what she had to do. She turned on the emergency system and sent a signal into deep space, a cry for help, simple and desperate. To any who can hear us, we beg you, help us. We are dying. And she added one final sentence. We are peaceful. We seek aid, not war. That message raced across the stars, through dying systems and empty voids. Many heard it, ignored it. Some even laughed. The Council of Worlds did nothing. It had already abandoned Therion during the first Varnock attack. But the signal kept traveling deeper and deeper until it reached a place no one had spoken of in centuries. A place the galaxy had forgotten on purpose. Earth. On a silent moon orbiting a gas giant far outside known space. The signal was picked up by a black receiver. No one lived there. No guards. No crew. Just machines. Humans who didn't forget betrayal. The message played once. Then the system ran it through voice analysis, emotional depth scanning, and threat index coding. Final result. Authentic distress. No lies. Real fear. The machines waited. Then a cold code was triggered deep in the buried system. Activate Protocol Deathwake. Transmission was sent in, returned fast, encrypted, and terrifying. It traveled back to Earth's dead fleet, a place the galaxy thought was dust, a place the galaxy would now regret waking up. Within hours, ancient Terran satellites turned toward the stars. Hidden war stations lit up one by one. On the black surface of Mars, deep beneath the old colonies, vaults opened. Out came shapes machines of war, not like any other. These were not ships with names. These were weapons built for only one thing: total destruction. They were part of Earth's last line of defense. And now, that defense had been pointed outward. The signal had not reached humanity. It had reached the Deathworlders and Earths. Deathworlders did not send peacekeepers. They sent fire. Across the galaxy, listening stations picked up strange frequencies. Faint, low, rumbling like thunder across water. Then came images blurry, impossible to track, of black ships moving in perfect silence, without lights, without calcines. Even the pirate kings of Sector X9 scrambled their fleets and ran, because they knew the old legends. About Earth. About what happened the last time someone called for help and broke it. The legends said Earth left the galaxy not in surrender, but in silence. Watching, waiting, listening, on Therian Prime. Chancellor Alira stood with her eyes to the sky. Her message had gone out 3 days ago. No one had answered. Had moved into the inner cities now. Their machines marched through fire. Her people were dying. She felt shame for sending the message. Maybe she had only called the end faster. But then, the sky changed. Above the capital were 3 Varnock. Motherships hovered. A shadow fell. Not from the enemy, but from something bigger, something ancient, something angry. One single Terran dread ship. Black, silent, covered in old markings that none could read anymore. It hovered above the Varnock fleet and said nothing. Then, in one breathless moment, it opened fire. There was no warning, no demand, no treaty, just destruction. In seconds, all 3 Varnock motherships were turned into glowing dust. No survivors, no escape. The Deathworlder ship didn't even move it, simply ended its enemies like a god striking down insects. Across Therian Prime, the skies lit with blue fire as more Terran war machines emerged from orbit. They didn't land. They didn't speak. They continued their hunt. And any Varnak ship that moved died. Any weapon that rose burned. Chancellor Elira stood frozen. Around her, refugees emerged from hiding. No one cheered. No one clapped. They didn't know if they had been saved, or if something worse had arrived. And still, the Terran ship hovered, watching, waiting then. The last message came. It wasn't in a voice. It was burned into the sky. Pure light. Written in a language the Therians didn't know but felt in their bones. You called? We came. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Your enemies are ours now. Stand clear. And with that, the Deathworlder fleet turned its engines and began to move. Not away, but toward the Varnak homeworld. The Terran warships did not stop. They moved like shadows across the stars, focused and cold. Their weapons were quiet, but their actions shook entire systems. As the last Varnak ships fell in the skies above Therian Prime, the Deathworlders set a new course. Their path was not random. It was calculated, sharp, and direct. They were going home not to Earth, but to Varnak Prime, the center of the enemy's empire. The world that had broken every treaty, invaded peaceful colonies, and enslaved entire species. The same world that, long ago, had helped betray Earth. Few remembered that history. Most didn't want to. It had been hidden under council records, buried under false peace and quiet lies. But Earth hadn't forgotten. It never did.
Ow.
The time had come to make the galaxy remember what it had tried to erase. In the deep cold of space, the Deathworlder fleet grew. From hidden sectors, more ships arrived, sleek, black, made of metals no one could scan. These weren't new ships. They were old, from a time before the Council. Weapons built not to hold territory, but to erase it. Inside each ship there were no commanders, only programs, cold minds, eye brains linked directly to Earth's last war protocols. No emotion, no mercy. Only mission. Across neutral systems, panic spread. Civilian ships scrambled to clear the routes as the Deathworlders passed. Messages were sent, warnings, questions, even pleas for peace. But the Terran fleet didn't answer. It never answered. They were not diplomats. They were not protectors. Their judgment wrapped in steel. Back on Therian Prime, Chancellor? Elira stood before the people, trying to explain what had happened. Some called the Terrans saviors. Others called them demons. But all agreed on one thing. Earth had changed. It was no longer the world the Council once mocked. It was no longer part of politics or trade. It had become something greater, a storm that only arrived when it was already too late. Elira stared into the screen, watching the red dot marking the fleet's movement, and in her heart she felt a chill. She knew the Terrans had saved them, but she also knew something deeper. They hadn't come for Therian. They had come because of old blood. Long ago, when the Council rose in power, Earth had offered peace, technology, protection, unity. But some worlds, like Varnak Prime, saw Earth as a threat. They feared human strength, their endurance, their unpredictable minds. And so, they lied. They spread rumors. They forged reports of Earth's aggression. And the Council listened. Earth was banned, surrounded, pushed out of the galaxy it helped build. And when Earth finally turned silent and walked away, the Council felt safe. But the Varnak did more than silence Earth. They stole from it. Secretly, they took Terran tech, reverse-engineered it, and built weapons meant to destroy everything Earth stood for. Now, those same weapons were being vaporized by Deathworlder fire. On Varnak Prime, alarms screamed. Defense grids spun to life. Their fleet, thousands of ships launched into the upper skies, waiting for the battle they thought they could win. They had faced Council enemies before. They had crushed weaker species. They believed themselves untouchable. But they had never faced Earth's wrath. When the Deathworlders arrived, they did not come in chaos. They came in order, clean formations, zero noise. Ship locked into perfect position like pieces of a giant machine. The Varnak fleet charged forward and was erased in minutes. Their ships didn't explode. They vanished disintegrated by beams that cut through space itself. No shields could stop them. No speed could escape them. From orbit, Varnak citizens watched in terror as their sky turned black, and then the Terran message came not in words, but in a cold light display burned into their moon. Your debt has come due. Inside the Varnak Central Command, General Harlan shouted for countermeasures, but the systems were already dead. Satellites failed. Weapon silos wouldn't respond. Communications were jammed. Nothing worked. It was like the Terrans had turned the planet off. Panic spread. Leaders ran. People screamed. And then the Deathworlders did what they always did. They moved forward. They didn't glass the planet. They didn't fire at civilians. They just landed. One ship, one door. And from that door stepped a single Terran figure clad in black, his face hidden, no weapons in hand. He spoke once, loud and clear, using the Varnak's own language. You betrayed us when we offered peace. Now you will understand the cost. Then the real destruction began, not through guns, but through memory. The Terrans released ancient records, videos, truths long buried. They showed the Varnak, people what their leaders had done, how they had lied to the Council, how they had killed innocent humans, how they had started a war Earth never wanted. The Varnak didn't fight after that. They just fell to their knees, and Earth didn't destroy the planet. They let it live in shame, broken and watched. A reminder to the galaxy that peace could have been possible. But now, only fire remained. Long ago, before the death fleets, before the fear, before the silence, there was hope. Earth had once stood among the stars, not as a monster, but as a builder. Humans had joined the galactic community with open hands. They brought medicine, clean energy, and protection. Their colonies grew fast. Their minds solved problems other species thought impossible. At first, the galaxy welcomed them, but then came fear, not because Earth was cruel, but because Earth was capable. The Council began to whisper, how could a species from a death world rise so fast? But why did they adapt to every planet they touched? Why did no disease kill them, no poison stop them, and no battlefield defeat them for long? The whispers turned into fear. That fear turned into lies, and the lies grew into betrayal. The official story told across the galaxy was simple. Earth had withdrawn. Earth had chosen isolation. Earth had wanted power and refused peace. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was that the galaxy made Earth an offer. Kneel or be cast out. And Earth had chosen neither. It had vanished. The Deathworlders left no trail, no broadcasts. They didn't fight. They didn't explain. They simply disappeared into the outer dark. Beyond the rim of known space, and over time, the galaxy began to forget. They taught their children Earth was a myth. The stories of fire and steel were legends made to scare fools. But there were always some pirates, explorers, warlords who remembered, and they warned, don't wake them, don't call them, don't beg them for help, because if they come back, they don't bring peace. Those warnings were real, as Earth's black ships blazed through the Varnak systems. Worlds across the stars froze in fear. Entire governments locked down. Fleets went silent. Even warlords shut down their weapons, afraid to be noticed, because if the Deathworlders were moving, it meant someone had called them. And if someone called them, then someone was about to pay. In the deep chambers of the old Galactic Council, the few leaders who remained argued in panic. Some wanted to send messages to Earth, others wanted to hide, but none could agree, and all of them were afraid to say the truth out loud. Earth had kept its silence for centuries, but they had never forgiven, yet they had never forgotten. While the galaxy debated, the Terran fleet continued its advance. But something strange happened. They didn't destroy every system. In fact, many worlds were left untouched. Why? Because Earth had a list. No one knew who made it. No one knew how it worked. But they all feared it. The list was not about borders. It was about memory. The Deathworlders didn't fire unless a world had betrayed them. More helped those who did. Some planets had lied. Some had sold humans out. Some had done nothing when their friends burned. Those planets were now ash, but others small. Quiet, forgotten, were spared. A message would appear in their skies. You remembered us. You stayed silent. We pass over you in peace. And then, like shadows, the ships moved on. Back on Varnock Prime, the silence was deeper than ever. The planet had not been destroyed, but its pride had. Their leaders were gone, their history rewritten. The people were still alive, but now they knew what had been done in their name. Children cried not because they were punished, but because they had been lied to their whole lives, and far away. On a quiet moon orbiting the ruins of a war-torn system, a single Terran ship landed without sound. A black figure stepped out. He placed a stone on the ground, not a weapon. A marker, it read. Here stood a world that helped when others stayed silent. Earth was not just bringing death, it was bringing memory, the kind that burned deeper than fire. The stars were cold above the Elorian belt, and nothing moved. Trade lanes once filled with cargo ships now stood empty. Stations that once blinked with traffic lights were dark and hollow. Everyone was watching the Terran fleet. Everyone was. Remembering what had been said long ago, but ignored. If you ever force Earth into a corner, don't expect peace. Expect extinction. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Spoken by the last Terran ambassador before Earth vanished from the council chambers forever. Back then, the other races laughed. They thought humans were bluffing. After all, Earth had never started a war. It always tried to talk. It always gave second chances. That was Earth's weakness, they said, but they misunderstood. It wasn't weakness. It was restraint. Now that restraint was gone, and now the war had started, not because Earth wanted it, but because someone Varnock Prim had forced it to begin, and the galaxy was not ready. As the Deathworlder fleet moved from the Varnock systems, something far worse followed, a second wave, ships that didn't answer to code. Ships that bore no markings, silent, faster, and shaped like weapons, not vessels. These were not warships. These were executioners. Controlled by Earth's ancient A's, they had only one function: hunt and erase. Their targets were not armies. They were records, governments, satellites, histories, where they flew. Entire planets lost their memories. Databanks were wiped clean. Statues turned to dust. Archives erased from orbit. Whole species forgot who they had betrayed. Earth didn't just want to destroy the guilty. It wanted the galaxy to forget their lies. And behind that wave came the oldest ship of all. It was massive, almost the size of a small moon. It moved slowly, no light, no engines. It seemed to float on the fabric of space itself. Its name was never spoken. But the oldest races had a name for it, whispered only in shadows. The Leviathan. It was Earth's final warning. If the Council had any hope of stopping the war, it would have to act now. But they didn't move. Their fleets were too weak, their systems too afraid. And many knew the truth: if the Leviathan was active, then Earth had already passed the point of return. On a backwater moon called Delonix, a message beacon blinked to life. It was the voice of a dying commander from the old Terran Navy. The recording was over 200 years old, but the voice was sharp and cold. We gave them peace. They returned lies. We gave them friendship. They returned fire. Let the stars record. This, we do not begin wars, but we end them, completely. That message spread across the galaxy like fire. Civilizations that had once laughed at humans were now emptying their banks, abandoning their cities, hiding in asteroid belts. Warlords turned off their weapons and begged for silence. But the Deathworlders kept moving. They didn't stop. They didn't even notice the fear, because fear was not enough. Anymore they were after balance. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to correct. Back on Therian Prime, Chancellor Alira watched the data feeds. She had seen the truth. She had understood what others refused to believe. Earth wasn't a monster. Earth was a mirror. It showed every world what they really were. And if they didn't like what they saw, then the Deathworlders brought fire to clean it. She turned to her advisors and spoke clearly. This is the war we were warned never to start, and now no one can stop it. In deep space, the Leviathan's outer shell began to glow, and every world on the list began to count its final days. It had no crew, no voice, no warmth. The Leviathan was not a ship, it was a force built in silence, programmed with a single purpose: to awaken only when the galaxy had failed completely. For centuries it had slept in the cold, dark beyond. The edge of the known stars, hidden behind collapsing stars and drifting asteroid fields, it had watched without blinking. And now it opened its eyes. The energy signature pulsing from the Leviathan was like nothing ever seen. Not heat. Fusion. Something deeper. Something older. It sent ripples across subspace, knocking out sensors light years away. Entire systems went dark as its signal passed through. The stars themselves seemed to dim. In every corner of the galaxy, leaders held their breath. The Terran fleet was already terrifying, but the Leviathan was beyond fear. It was legend. And now it was awake. Inside its walls were memories infiltrated, raw, terrible memories. Not just of battles, but of betrayal. Of the day Earth's last colony fell, not by alien weapons, but by the Council's silence. The day Earth asked for help, and the stars looked away. That wound had never healed. Instead, it had grown into something unstoppable. The Leviathan was not built to bring revenge. It was built to bring an ending. On a distant research world, Azarnian scientists watched the ancient transmission again and again. Project Leviathan, Earth's final silence. It was never meant to be activated. Only if peace was dead. Only if justice had failed. It's only if Earth was truly alone. Now, those conditions had been met. The Varnic attack was just the spark. But the truth, the Council's old lies, the stolen tech, the decades of cover-ups was the fuel. Leviathan was not here to punish a few. It was here to correct the galaxy's path, one system at a time, permanently. As the massive ship moved forward, its outer shell unfolded like petals of a flower. Dozens of smaller ships, dark, silent, sharp-launched from hidden bays. They didn't attack, not yet. They positioned themselves around key targets: communication arrays, relay gates, star forges, orbital archives, not to destroy them, but to erase them. This was a different kind of war. It wasn't about firepower. It was about removing memory, erasing. The stories, rewriting history. Wherever the Leviathan passed, the galaxy would forget what it once was and begin again. Back on the old Council world of Cirrus Prime, emergency meetings turned into chaos. Some members begged to surrender to Earth. Others demanded to hide underground, to abandon all contact. But none of them could agree on one thing. What? Earth wanted, because the Deathworlders had sent no demands, no messages, no warnings, only silence. And in that silence came terror. Chancellor Elira of Therion watched the Leviathan's path with dry, tired eyes. Her world had survived barely. She had sent the SOS. She had awakened the storm. But more than guilt, she felt something else now, something no one wanted to say. Maybe we deserved this. Maybe the galaxy had been too proud. It had been too cruel. Maybe Earth had only done what no one else dared to do: hold a mirror to their sins and then wipe them clean. The Leviathan hovered now over the world of Koresh, where Council leaders had once voted to exile Earth. Its sensors scanned the planet. Quiet, cold, final. Then, a signal shot from its corpuscular white light dawned in a single pulse. Koresh's skies turned black. No noise, no flames, just ERASURE. Every satellite vanished. Every orbiting weapon melted. Every communication system collapsed. No one died, but Koresh was gone from the map, from memory. From the galaxy's story, that was the Leviathan's punishment. Oblivion, one by one. The list was being fulfilled, and the stars once filled with noise were falling into silence again. The galaxy held its breath. From the frozen moons of the outer rim to the golden towers of the central systems, a terrible stillness had spread. Trade routes were empty. Spaceports once filled with noise and light were silent. Patrol fleets vanished from orbit, no one moved, no one dared. The Deathworlder fleet had not spoken a single word since it began its path of correction. And now, with the Leviathan awake and wiping worlds from memory, fear had evolved into something worse: acceptance. Every race, every system, every government began to understand the truth. This wasn't a war. It was a reckoning. In quiet rooms and bunkers far below the surfaces of once proud cities, the old leaders finally faced their pasts. They whispered of what they had done when Earth first asked for help centuries ago. How they chose to stay quiet. How they watched human colonies burn and said nothing. How they voted to exile Earth not because it was a threat, but because it made them feel weak. Now, those decisions had returned like ghosts, dressed in steel, moving across the stars without sound. This was the price of betrayal. It was being paid not in fire, but in silence. Above the shattered remains of Koresh, the Leviathan drifted, unmoving. Below, the once bustling world was a graveyard of memory, its history erased, deleted from the galactic maps. To outsiders, it now appeared as just another dead planet. But those who had known its name remembered the cost, and they wondered who would be next. From the edge of the Varnak ruins, a strange signal emerged. Single Varnak commander, once a fierce general who had mocked Earth's weakness, now sat alone in a shattered bunker, whispering into a static-covered channel. His voice trembled, not from pain, but from something worse: regret. "We were wrong," he said. "We laughed when the humans warned us. We thought their silence meant surrender. But now I understand. It was waiting. It was rage without sound." The signal was picked up by one of the smaller Deathworlder cruisers. It analyzed the voice, confirmed the location, but no reply came, not even a warning. The cruiser didn't open fire. It didn't send judgment. It simply marked the coordinates and moved on. That was Earth's message. There would be no talks, no pleas, no forgiveness, only the list, one by one. Without mercy, Therian Prime watched all of this unfold with frozen hearts. Chancellor Alira, once desperate for salvation, now stood on the edge of her rebuilt command tower, staring into the void above. The Terran fleet had passed over her world. They had not destroyed it, but they had not spoken either. They had only burned the Varnak invaders to ash and moved on. She realized now they hadn't come for her people. They had come for their own purpose. That purpose was not justice. It was a reminder Earth hadn't returned to conquer. It had returned to make the galaxy feel what it had once felt: alone, abandoned, and betrayed. Meanwhile, deep inside the Leviathan, where no biological life could exist, the ancient Terran core stirred, not artificial intelligence, not emotion, something older, something human that had lived through centuries of silence, pain, and fury. It wasn't there to listen. It wasn't there to think. It was there to finish what had been started. The Leviathan began to move again. Systems that thought they were safe, the ones that had said nothing when Earth was exiled, began to panic. Some tried to broadcast peace. Some offered gifts. Others claimed they were neutral. But the Deathworlders had a different rule. If you watched humanity suffer and said nothing, you were already guilty. As the Leviathan crossed into the heart of former Council space, thousands of smaller Terran ships joined its path. Some had been hidden for centuries. Others were brand new, forged in silence on Earth's hidden moons. Their black hulls gleamed with fire. Their weapons remained cold, for now, because Earth was not rushing. It was remembering, and soon the storm would break. It began without warning. No explosions, no battle cries. It's just a quiet pulse, soft, wide, and visible to the eye. Moved faster than light, touching thousands of systems at once. Planets blinked out, space stations shut down. Star forges died. In silence, it was as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. Across the galaxy, entire networks failed. Satellites stopped spinning. Emergency beacons flickered, then went black. The lights of civilization vanished. This wasn't war. It was removal. A clean, precise, cold erasure. Earth had flipped. A single switch, then the galaxy went dark. The Leviathan hung in the silence, motionless, its massive hull glowing with ghostly blue lines. Around it circled the Deathworlder fleet like shadows. No voices, no signals, no instructions. They didn't need orders. The list was being fulfilled. Those who had stood against Earth, those who had profited from its silence, those who had fed lies into the mouths of generations, they were being removed, one system at a time, not through blood, through absence. Andrella Station, a high-security research outpost once responsible for dissecting Terran tech in secret. The scientists watched in frozen horror as their systems unraveled. Their backup generators collapsed. Their archives disappeared. Even their thoughts seemed slower, heavier, as though time itself had shifted. The final transmission they saw was not an explosion, but a phrase blinking across every terminal in red. You were warned. Then dash darkness. Elsewhere, powerful war fleets tried to regroup. The Jarnock Alliance, known for its unmatched firepower, launched half its fleet to block the Terran advance. But the Deathworlders didn't fight them. They didn't need to. Simply shut them down. A silent wave of signal interference blinded the Jarnock ships, twisted their engines, and flipped their weapons inward. The fleet vanished in a burst of confusion, never firing a single shot in the halls of the Shattered Council. Those few leaders who remained began to whisper things they had never dared say aloud. That Earth had never been the villain. That they had made it the villain. That long ago, they chose comfort over courage. And now, the galaxy was being reset by the ones they cast out. Back on Earth, there were no cheers, no celebrations. Cities remained quiet. Oceans calm. Skies untouched. The people didn't watch the broadcasts because there were none. Humanity wasn't seeking attention. They were delivering balance. In silence. In total control. They didn't want the galaxy to beg. They didn't want it to surrender. They wanted it to understand. Therian Prime watched all of this with wide eyes. Its people, once desperate, now stood in silent awe of what they had awoken. Chancellor Illyra no longer asked for Earth's help. She no longer feared Earth's strength. She simply waited, hoping her world wouldn't be next. Because, deep down, she knew this was bigger than politics, bigger than war. This was retribution written into the stars, and yet, something else was stirring. In the deep sectors beyond, even the Leviathan Earth had sent something more. A final fleet, silent one, built not for war or memory or removal, but for the final message. What it was, no one knew, but it was coming, and when it arrived, the galaxy would change forever. They thought it was over. The galaxy, battered and hushed, floated in a strange kind of peace. The Deathworlder fleet had stopped its advance. The Leviathan hung in orbit above the final system on the list, unmoving. Systems erased, empires silenced, councils dissolved, no shots fired, no bodies left behind. Just silence. Heavy, total silence. Across the stars, survivors waited, holding their breath, wondering if the Terrans were finally done. But deep in the void, something older had been. Moving. Something no sensor could track. A final fleet. It's not made of steel or fire, not carrying weapons or machines. This was different. This was Earth's last word. They came quietly, dark ships shaped like knives, drifting between dead stars and burned systems. One by one, they arrived above old worlds, long forgotten, long destroyed. Places where humans had once lived. Places the galaxy had erased. The ships opened, began to build. Not cities, not fortresses, but monuments, massive. Glowing towers rose from the dust, each one pulsed with light, slow, steady, alive. They weren't weapons, they were messages. Not in any alien tongue, but in Earth's oldest language. A language spoken not with sound, but with meaning. A language written into sky and stone. A warning, a truth, a memory. We were kind, you were cruel. We asked for help, you stayed. Silent, now you will remember. These towers did not hide. shone, bright enough to be seen from orbit. Their light could not be blocked, could not be ignored. They burned into the minds of every passing ship, every surviving satellite, every living being. Even those who had never heard of Earth before felt something inside when they looked at them. A weight, a lesson, a truth. And then Earth left, just like that. The Deathworlder fleets vanished into the dark, one by one. The Leviathan closed its eyes and slipped back into the void, silent once more. The stars returned to their natural order. The trade lanes reopened. The power grids hummed back to life. But nothing was the same. Because now, across the galaxy, those towers stood unmoving, unaging, unblinking, 1,000 glowing reminders of what had happened, what had been unleashed. No one could destroy them. No one dared try. In schools, alien children were taken to see them. In temples, priests whispered their meanings. On quiet nights, starfarers passed nearby and turned off their engines just to listen to the light. Earth didn't just bring war. It brought memory. It made sure the galaxy would never forget. Therion, Prime survived, but its skies remained forever watched by one of the towers. And Chancellor Alira, now old and tired, often stood beneath it at dawn, eyes full of silence. She had called for help. She had brought the storm. But she had also learned. That Earth had not sought revenge. It had delivered a lesson too large for words, and what of Earth? It returned to silence. Its people said nothing. Its ships stayed hidden, but all across the galaxy. Whenever a new power rose, whenever a new alliance whispered of betrayal or control, eyes would turn to the black part of the map, the place with no stars, and a single phrase would rise again. Don't call the Deathworlders unless you're ready for the truth. So the stars remembered. Forever.